Hey, it's Maria, and you are watching the Wealth Creation channel where we talk about wealth, financial freedom, business, money, lifestyle, all of that stuff that will help you get from where you are today to get to a life that you would much rather be living. If you like that idea, then subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you get notifications of these videos. So, today I want to talk about an emergency fund, which is a savings account that you're supposed to keep in order to pay for emergencies. And all of the big gurus talk about this. You want to reduce debt, you want to have an emergency fund, you want to start investing, you want to do all this stuff. And you're like, but I don't make that much money. How can I do all of this stuff? So let's talk about an emergency fund specifically and how I view it and how I do it, because that's what I do. I share what I do, and then if you like it, then you can take that for yourself, and if you don't, then maybe you can tweak it and make it for yourself that way. So for me, an emergency fund is for big expenses that I don't expect, like if my transmission goes out in my van, or if, let's see, the roof were to cave in and insurance wasn't going to cover it, or if I have a big bill, medical bill that's not covered by insurance, or something like that. So these are like if the refrigerator goes out or something that you have to cover that's big. And by big, I personally mean over $1,000. So for me, an emergency fund would not be $500, but then I'm also not struggling like I was at one time. There was a time an emergency fund of $100 would have been a really big deal for me. So I think that you need to have an emergency fund, and it's not like 3 to 6 months of income, or it's not some arbitrary amount. It's like, look at this is how much I make. This is, how much my expenses are. These are the things that could go wrong. You're not going to think of all of them, but if you have an older car that has a lot of repairs, having a fund for something like that is probably essential to you. If you have a brand new refrigerator, it's probably not something that you need to worry about because it's going to be under warranty if it breaks. But if you have a really old refrigerator, you might want to start either saving up for a new one or putting some money in a fund so that if it does break, you have that, or your furnace breaks or whatever. Now, the other thing to think about is, do I own my home or am I renting? Because if you're renting, your landlord's probably going to take care of all of those things, so you don't have those types of emergency expenses, but you might have other emergency expenses like I talked about, like your car, like medical bills if you don't have insurance or if you don't have adequate insurance, um, or just other things like that. So emergency funds are really, really very personal, I think. And I would sit down and take a piece of paper or do it on a computer and write out the big expenses that you think that you might need to worry about in the next couple years. Whether that's your car, your home. These are not for fun things. You're not like saving for a vacation or saving for like a facelift or anything like that. These are like true emergencies where you have to pay out the money in order to get the thing done, and the thing has to get done. Like you have to have a working car in order to get to work, stuff like that. And then you can say, okay, this is how much I think I need for an emergency fund. And then I want you to take that number and take it times 1.5. So if you say you need $1,000, go 1,000 times 1.5 is $1,500. And that should be your goal for your emergency fund. And then what you do is you start saving towards that fund. If you are a person who, if you have $1, you're going to spend $1, then I would put it somewhere that it's kind of hard to get to. Like start a separate bank account, or put it in an envelope in a safe if you want to put it in cash, or give it to a trusted friend who won't let you have it back, just because you want to go out and pay for $200 concert tickets. That's not an emergency. Or whatever you need to do to really start banking that emergency fund. Now, how much do you put in it? All right, $1,500. I don't have $1,500 lying around, but I might have an extra $10 out of my paycheck. If you get paid every week and you take $10 out of your paycheck, that's going to take what? 100 weeks or a couple years to get to $1,500. Is that right? No, 150 weeks. 150 times 10 is 1,500. I don't know. I'm not doing the math in my head right now. But you figure out how many weeks it'll take you to get to your goal. And if that's not quick enough, then can you do $15 a week or $20 a week? Or if you get paid every other week, can you do $20 out of that check? You have to, if you take small amounts out, it's not as painful. Like, there are people who are truly, truly living from paycheck to paycheck and they don't have any money left over. But if most people are honest with themselves, they have money left over and they're kind of just spending it on frivolous things. A lot of people, a big one is people eat out too much. It's just much more convenient than actually cooking at home. Or they get too many of their high priced coffees, or they buy too many clothes that they just don't ever wear, or stuff like that. So most people can find an extra $15 or $20 in their paycheck each time they get paid to put aside. And then you can say, all right, based on me putting $10, I got to do this math. Hang on a minute. I got a calculator over here. So $10 a week, yes, 150 weeks. So that's like 3 years it's going to take you. But if you did $30 a week, then it would take you like a year to get to your $1,500. Or if you could just say, anytime I get extra money, so I get 40 hours a week at work, but if I get overtime, I'm going to put my overtime money into that fund, because you don't really rely on that, unless you always get it, then you start to rely on it. But if it's every once in a while, you don't rely on it, so you can put that extra money in the fund. You still got a grandma who gives you $5 for your birthday, you can put that money into the fund. Or anything extra that you get. Maybe you buy a scratch off and you win $10. Maybe you put that money into the fund. But the thing of it is, that I said in the beginning, is to make that amount personal to you, not an arbitrary amount based on somebody else's formula, because you're not living in their formula. They're not living your life. So you got to do what's right for you. So then once you've got your amount, you're going to have some peace of mind, because you're going to know, wow, if my refrigerator goes out because it's old and it's getting there, I have enough money in my bank to buy a new one. That's pretty cool. If my transmission goes out, I have enough money to get a new one. Now, transmissions are more than $1,500, but that was an example. You're going to do what's right for you and what you reasonably think that you're going to need. And then the other thing is, once you reach that goal, keep putting that money in. You're used to putting it in. You're used to adding to that fund. Keep adding to it and just let it keep growing and growing, because remember, when you need to use that, it's going to take it all away. So if you keep going and now instead of $1,500, you've got $3,000 or $5,000, and you get hit with a $1,500 bill, you still have a cushion. It's like, wow, I'm so glad I kept saving. Plus, it's putting you into the habit of saving. And, once you get a certain amount, you can then start investing some of that in vehicles that are going to give you more interest than a regular savings account. Okay, what about using your credit cards? A lot of people are like, well, if I have an emergency, I will just use this credit card. So if you have a really low interest credit card, yeah, like those exist, right? But if you had a really low interest credit card, then I would say you could keep that for an emergency fund, but you would have to be really disciplined to pay it off quickly, because you're going to pay a lot of money in interest. Now, what about those 0% APR credit cards? Those are great, but an emergency fund is a long-term thing. And a lot of those, they're like 0% on anything for 15 months. Well, if you never use that card and you have it for more than 15 months, you're not getting 0% anymore. And we don't know if in 15 months there will be more 0% credit cards you can apply for, or if you're going to be able to get it based on your credit and other things in your life. And even the economy in general, who knows? The credit card companies could tighten up if they're worried that a lot of people are going to default. So even if you have great credit, you could get turned down. You just don't know. So I have credit cards. I have a couple of them that I rarely use. And if I had a really big emergency that my emergency fund couldn't cover, then I might use those, but then I would be paying them off really, really quickly. So I wouldn't use that as a first defense. I would use that as like my last option. So yeah, and then another last option is if you have investments that you could cash in if it was a really huge major disaster. Like let's say that you were in a situation and something happened. Oh, okay, let's say a tornado just devastated you and your entire home was gone and all of your stuff was gone and everything. And yeah, the insurance is going to pay off, but maybe not for a while. So you need to have an emergency fund, and maybe you have maxed your credit cards out and maybe you have to cash in your investments and all that kind of stuff. That would be like disaster, not emergency. But that's the type of thing that I would use for that big of a disaster, not like a new appliance emergency or a car repair emergency, if that makes sense. And eventually, hopefully, the insurance would pay off and you would be able to, replenish, pay off those cards and replenish everything that way. So yeah, so that's just what I wanted to talk about today, emergency funds. I hope you found this information helpful. Let me know in the comments what you do as far as emergency funds and what your philosophy is about saving up and having money set aside for, emergencies. All right, that's it for now. Here's to our success.